LaMarcus Aldridge has been made available by the San Antonio Spurs, and the Toronto Raptors need a lot of front court help. So, is this a good fit for both parties, and should the Raptors trade for LaMarcus Aldridge? Let's get into it. Welcome, Raptors fans, to Amateur Hour Sports, the channel where you get NBA content with a focus on the Toronto Raptors. We do a ton of videos, we do a ton of live stream watch-alongs like the one we're doing tonight for the Raptors game, so make sure you are there for a good time tonight. But the video today, before we get into it, make sure you hit the like button if you do enjoy at any point to help us reach some new viewers, and subscribe to Amateur Hour Sports for more content just like this. But today, we're talking about LaMarcus Aldridge. Again, the San Antonio Spurs have decided to make him available. They have mutually agreed to part ways as the relationship just isn't quite working out this year, which means there are a lot of teams who need front court help that are going to be suitors for LaMarcus Aldridge as we near the upcoming trade deadline. Now, the Toronto Raptors, it's no secret that they need front court help. They lost Marc Gasol and Serge Ibaka in the offseason, replaced them with Aaron Baines and Alex Len. Now, Alex Len no longer with the Toronto Raptors. Aaron Baines has underwhelmed for the position, and we really need some extra bit of help in the front court spot. So LaMarcus Aldridge, a guy who has been made available, probably won't have to trade a lot for him because of his massive contract. Is this a good fit for both parties? So for starters, we're going to get into the player and how he fits in with the Toronto Raptors system, and then we're going to break down the contractual stuff that will make or break this trade. So for starters, LaMarcus Aldridge as a fit with the Toronto Raptors. Let's think about this offensively. LaMarcus Aldridge has been one of the best scoring front court players in the NBA over the last decade or so, but recently with the San Antonio Spurs has regressed this season to a point where he's no longer even starting the games for the Spurs, averaging less than 14 points per game. He just isn't quite the player he used to be. Now, LaMarcus Aldridge is a player who haunts the Raptors for sure, because in the 2006 NBA entry draft, there were two suitors for that first overall pick that the Toronto Raptors possessed. LaMarcus Aldridge 1, Andrea Bargnani number 2. Now, I don't need to go into who the Raptors selected in that draft, but it wasn't LaMarcus Aldridge. So the Raptors really let that one slip away, and if they could go back and change their decision, I'm sure they would. So LaMarcus Aldridge immediately is the one that got away. Another interesting thing about Raptors and LaMarcus Aldridge was that when he was a free agent after the 2015 season and decided to leave the Portland Trail Blazers, the Raptors famously got a meeting with this marquee free agent, and apparently did quite well in this meeting, but the Raptors, not known for their prowess in the free agent market, were not able to land LaMarcus Aldridge, who eventually chose the San Antonio Spurs. But still, the Raptors did well in the meeting. Maybe there's a little bit of a relationship there that can be resurrected if LaMarcus Aldridge does come to the Raptors before this trade deadline. Now, his fit with the team, LaMarcus Aldridge is a great scorer in the front court, a guy who has his spot in the mid-range. You know, the NBA is kind of tailoring away towards his style of play. That's why he's been moved from a power forward to a center. But nonetheless, a guy who can score on the interior, a guy who can get rebounds, and would make this Raptors team look so much better on offense. Like, think about this Raptors team looks quite good on offense, you know, when they're healthy, not when they're missing 5 players against the Atlanta Hawks. But the Raptors, they look quite good on offense without LaMarcus Aldridge. Now, if you add LaMarcus Aldridge to the mix instead of Aaron Baines, this team looks a whole of a lot better. So offensively, sure, this trade makes sense because Aldridge offers you a lot on the interior, rebounding on the interior, plus some scoring on the interior that they have been lacking this season. This would help the Raptors a lot with their offensive game for sure. Now, the thing about LaMarcus Aldridge is that you can't just talk about the offensive game, because there's two parts to the game, especially for the Toronto Raptors. You got to worry about the defensive part of the game. And LaMarcus Aldridge, this season in particular, has struggled defending the interior. LaMarcus Aldridge is 35 years old. He is not getting any younger, and it seems like this season, age has really caught up to him. He's been an All-Star 3 times since signing with the Spurs in 2015, but those All-Star days are behind him. Again, he's regressed a lot from an offensive standpoint, and from a defensive standpoint, his lateral quickness has really regressed this season, to the point where the Spurs, when LaMarcus Aldridge is on the court, are 9.3 points worse off over 100 possessions, which accumulates to a lot of points that don't go in their favor when LaMarcus Aldridge is on the court. That's why he got demoted to a bench role. For the first time in his career, basically, LaMarcus Aldridge was demoted to a bench role. So, surely, we can understand that as a Raptors team who really relies on their defense in a lot of games, especially late in the third, fourth quarter when the Raptors can really switch on that extra little bit of effort on defense, LaMarcus Aldridge could provide a little bit of problem to the Raptors on the interior. I think Aaron Baines has significantly stepped up his interior defense over the last few weeks. He has turned into quite a serviceable defender for this Raptors team. Now, adding LaMarcus Aldridge to this mix makes me kind of nervous about how the Raptors would be able to play defense. Offensively, offers a lot, but understand, the Spurs have even put this guy on the bench because of his deficiencies on defense. So the Raptors, obviously, they need that front court help, but is this good enough? Is the offense good enough from LaMarcus Aldridge to really accept the fact that his defense isn't quite up to the level you would want for a Toronto Raptors player? Personally, on the surface, I wouldn't really mind this trade happening just because I think that, yes, this helps us on offense so much that this would make our team better. Despite his defense being a bit of a problem, I think that the Raptors could work it out with him and figure out how to get the best out of him on defense. So from a player standpoint, I think that this trade would work for the Raptors. I think that the fit is here. But the problem is the contract, and this is going to eliminate any possibility of this trade happening because LaMarcus Aldridge is on a pretty big contract, signed a pretty hefty extension with the Spurs 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago basically, made 3 years, $74 million or in around that margin. So LaMarcus Aldridge this season is making upwards of $24 million, which is, it's not one of the bigger contracts in the NBA, but it's big enough that it's a problem when you're trying to trade, especially when you're trying to trade to a Toronto Raptors team who has a lot of money tied up in their players. So currently, the highest paid players on the Raptors are Siakam, Lowry, Fred VanVleet, Norman Powell, and fifth is Aaron Baines, who makes $7 million. So you don't want to trade any of those first four players because you're just not getting a good enough return when you get LaMarcus Aldridge to come to the team. Like Siakam, Lowry, Fred VanVleet, or Norman Powell, those four, if you give one of those four to San Antonio for a package around LaMarcus Aldridge, you're losing that trade no matter what because all four of those players are more talented than LaMarcus Aldridge at this point in his career. So that doesn't make sense. So looking at the fifth best player on the Toronto Raptors, Aaron Baines, the fifth most paid player, that is, making about $7 million. Okay, now how do you balance out $7 million of Aaron Baines going to the Spurs and bringing back LaMarcus Aldridge on $24 million? You have to work out the contracts. That is the most difficult part about this. It's easy. It's easy for people to approach me and say, should the Raptors trade for X? Should the Raptors trade for Y? You got to understand that it's about the contracts as well. The player, yes, it makes sense for the Raptors to trade for specific players like an Andre Drummond, like a LaMarcus Aldridge, but you have to worry about how you're going to balance out contract situations. And the fact of the matter here is you can't. Unless you're going to give away a player who is much more talented than LaMarcus Aldridge, you're just not going to get a good enough return. Even if the Spurs can entice us with maybe a first-round pick or maybe a prospect, it just doesn't make enough sense for me. LaMarcus Aldridge on a rental, that would be awesome for the Raptors. I think that his offense would be enough that I could let go of some of the defensive deficiencies. Even though the Raptors are defense first, I think that with a talented defender like Aaron Baines in the team, we could be able to mitigate any of the concerns for Aldridge in the center slot. But I'm okay with that. It's just the contract. The contract, regardless of whether or not I'm okay with bringing in LaMarcus Aldridge, the contract is so expensive. It's so expensive that the Raptors just don't have the players, don't have the contract to be able to balance this one out and make it work. So would I do this trade? Probably if the trade makes sense, but there is no way to shape this trade up for it to make sense. There's just not enough there from the Raptors, money-wise, to balance out this trade and make it a good deal for both teams. There's no scenario where the Spurs are not coming out on top of this one. And for a 35-year-old LaMarcus Aldridge, well past his prime, with age catching up to him, it just doesn't make sense for the Raptors to break their neck trying to make this work for a guy who doesn't even play great defense, and the Raptors need the great defense, obviously. So for me, if the Raptors want a big, I sound like a broken record. I'm preaching to the choir here, talking about who the Raptors should trade for. I think, and a lot of you guys think that JaVale McGee is the best option for the Raptors. The Cleveland Cavaliers have way too many bigs on their roster. Trade them Patrick McCaw, a second-round pick, and I think they'd be willing to give up JaVale McGee, considering the amount of bigs on their roster. I think that makes sense. Now, if you can't get JaVale, you can also look at a Hassan Whiteside, who's not quite fitting in with the Sacramento Kings. Bring in Hassan Whiteside. Cheap contract. Again, you won't have to give up a lot to get him. Another one you can look at is Mo Bamba. Falling out a little bit with the rotation in Orlando. I think that's another one that makes sense. Just a cheap big who can shore up the rebounding, shore up the paint. Nothing special. This is a transition year. Let's try to be better next year, but can we win as many games as we can this season, as many games as possible? If we want to do that, we're going to need to bring in some help with the center department. That help is unfortunately not going to come from LaMarcus Aldridge. The contract is just so absurd that it just can't balance out for the Raptors without making the trade favorable for the San Antonio Spurs. I know he wants to leave, and the Spurs will give a cut price, but contracts, the only way we can give up enough money from contracts is by trading away a player who's just much more talented and much more important to the Raptors than LaMarcus Aldridge. A nice dream, but it's not going to happen. So what do you guys think of this LaMarcus Aldridge situation? Would you want LaMarcus Aldridge to come to the Raptors? Do you think the Raptors can make a trade work? And if so, what is that trade? Let me know all of your thoughts and opinions on this matter in the comments down below. But that wraps it for me for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you are still here, please like the video if you like, and subscribe to Amateur Hour Sports for more content just like this. Again, we do a ton of videos, we do a ton of live stream watch alongs, a ton of other stuff in the live stream as well. Yesterday I made tacos and I cooked on stream. We do a lot of fun stuff, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel, stay up to date with all this content, and hit that notification bell. At the end of the day, I believe what I say. If you disagree, that is okay. We'll see you again next time for another video.